Let's switch it to wide receiver. And this is why I love this time of year because there's so many different things you could do with this wide receiver group. And Josh, one of which is play more. If you don't think you have two tight ends that can rotate, now for the record, Jacob Warren and Prince DeFant rotated every series. But as it turned out, Warren got about 75% of the snaps. So it's not a question of whether or not he can play that number of snaps, just how fresh do you want somebody to be in an up-tempo offense? And it's easier to rotate those guys. They didn't do that at wide receiver. But what if your rotation is this before we break down some receivers? It's Warren, and then you go four wide. Warren, then you go four wide. Warren, then you go four wide. Thoughts? Because I'm not sold on McCallan Castles grabbing that second tight end spot yet.
They have four wide receivers that they really want on the field.
Yes.
So if there's a way, and I imagine with Josh Heupel's ability to think and plan and work around what his personnel is, they're going to find a way to get those guys on the field together. And they all have a different skill set, which can create incredible challenges for the opposing defense. So percentage breakdown, let's see. And let's see what the word is coming out of scrimmage action for McCallan Castles, where he gets his first real test probably for what he's able to do after the first week of camp. But to me, it makes a lot of sense if you look at the strength of this team and you see Bru McCoy and Ramel Keyton and then Dante Thornton and Squirrel White and what they're able to do. The more you can use those four guys, probably the more productive Tennessee can be and the more dangerous they are for opposing teams. Now, what that will create in the run game, how that affects what they want to do, Josh Heupel has a better idea than I will, because the tight end's still going to be really important there. But the skill set of Dante Thornton wowed on day one. The hype from Joey Halsley was very noticeable. That's not a guy that's going to be standing on the sideline a whole bunch. We've already seen Squirrel White play in a big spot against Clemson and perform really well. And his skill set can create mismatch problems. I still don't know why more teams weren't in on him earlier like Tennessee was. And I recognize the answer is probably just his size. But if you evaluate him, you can see what he's able to do despite his lack of height. So using those guys more will create more problems for opposing defenses, in my opinion.
He likes my four wide idea, Caleb. How about that? I didn't know if he'd like it. I just kind of threw that out there, Caleb. Do you like my idea or not?
No, I actually love it. And also when they have
throwing heat today. Love it.
Well, also when they have Warren and the three wide, because every other drive they're going to have Warren and the three wide, they can rotate in because Dante Thornton. Josh, correct me if I'm wrong. Dante Thornton can play any of the positions at wide receiver. He can play wide out or he can play in the slot. So you can just rotate like. Thornton is replacing one of the other players who's on the bench at one point, and then at one point all three of them are on and Thornton's on the bench. But you could have like a four receiver rotation for the three wide.
Yeah, they can use Thornton in different ways. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Squirrel or Dante necessarily. I think Ramel has just continued to gain so much trust. You want him on the field as much as possible. Bru McCoy for sure. But that's part of the problem here. Like saying, okay, which guy do you want to take off the field? Well, no player's putting his hand up, and I don't think a coach is circling a name saying, you know what, we don't need that guy. So it's a very good problem to try to figure out, and they're still trying to figure out where they are at tight end behind Jacob Warren in terms of trust, how much they can count on McCallan Castles. Ethan Davis looks impressive. He's also a freshman at that position, and that's tough to say right away what he's going to be able to do. But yeah, it's a legit big four, I think, at wide receiver. And this time a year ago, there wasn't much Ramel Keyton talk, and it turned out he was really ready to go a year ago. He just needed his opportunity in an unfortunate way with Cedric Tillman's injury. But this year going in, they're planning on four guys that they want on the field, which I think changes the offseason conversation. They also have 2 games to maybe work some things out. Against Virginia and against Austin Peay, they should have an opportunity to use different looks to try things out, and that's what scrimmage time in August is for as well.
For the record, we at Off the Hook Sports want Jacob Warren to catch 4 touchdowns a game. That's our goal. So we don't necessarily want 4 wide, but we are having the discussion. So we broke down Ramel Keyton, leadership ability, probably not the most talented guy. Dante Thornton is one of the most talented guys. And we talked about what Squirrel White did last year. Before I get to Bru McCoy, how might Squirrel White's role grow? Because that young man is brimming with confidence in his preseason interviews. I don't want to read too much into it, but he feels pretty good about the way the season's going to play out.
Yeah, well, he can make plays in a number of ways. Quick pass in the screen game to try to break something, or deep passes down the field, which we've seen him succeed on. What did he say his favorite route that he would like to run? Post corner, because of his quickness of how he can break against the DB. John Adams asked him that question, and he didn't hesitate with his answer. He knows that his shiftiness, his quickness is something that every defensive back or defender that would go up against him is going to have a problem with. So I've been really impressed with what I've seen from Squirrel, and that was with him as a freshman, still learning and playing with different quarterbacks, I guess, at different times. He's shown a connection with Joe Milton. That's been talked about with Joe and Ramel Keyton. It's real. They've worked together for the last couple of seasons on campus, but we saw Joe and Squirrel connect early and often last season. So it just that's why we're talking about it's difficult to figure out a guy to take off the field. They don't want to take off Ramel Keyton or Bru McCoy. Jacob Warren doesn't want to come off the field and shouldn't either, but he's going to get a breather at some point. So when that's happening, those 4 wide receivers make a whole lot of sense.
I know Caleb was going to jump in there about Bru, but Squirrel said that he and Joe, the combination reminds him of Shaq and Kobe. And then he said, whoa, no, let me correct myself. Mike and Pippen. First of all, it's cool that he's on a first name basis with Michael Jordan. But if you had to pick between the 2 duos of NBA superstars, who does Squirrel and Joe Milton most remind you of? That's today's tough question, brought to you by Zen Sports.
Yeah, there was there was a player that said, it was Brandon Miller, I guess. He said, actually, Paul George is my GOAT. And there are a few players that have said, yeah, Paul George is the guy that I've actually loved. I wish he had gone with I'm kind of like CJ McCollum and Dame Lillard. That's me and Joe. Just throwing a completely random duo at us. Or if he'd gone with an old school NBA Jam duo.
Or you could go Boy George and George Michael.
That's stretching a little further, but you could, for sure.
No, where we got that? Caleb's like, where did that
Oh my gosh.
Go ahead, Caleb.
Josh, so Bru McCoy. I want to throw a name that I'm getting reminded of with him a lot. And it's no one's saying it, it's just in my mind. The talk about him and his potential very much reminds me of the talk about Kelly Washington going into 2002.
Oh, man.
Because he wears 15.
I was going to say that too, Caleb.
I mean, wears 15. Honestly, yeah, he wears number 15. They seem to have a similar physical build advantage. And again, had Washington not gotten hurt, we don't know what would have happened. But do you see similarities in the level of hype around the 2?
And questionable attitude issues for different reasons. In-game antics with Bru, off practice, or fans just didn't like him with Kelly Washington. Yeah, I thought of that comparison early this morning, actually.
Yeah, I do think Bru's personality comes off as more reserved in the public. Kelly was happy to call himself the future. Remember that game day feature? That was something. I don't think that Bru told Jalin Hyatt to go to the NFL. Not that I know of. Compared to another story. But yeah, I mean, a physical ability. Bru is an older guy. Kelly was an even older player, right? Having gone the professional baseball route before coming back to college. Bru's maybe 23 now, but there are a lot of old guys in college football. Again, Keenan Peely's 25. But yeah, I mean, I can see some of that. Exactly how their games match up, I'm not totally sure. But from a physical standpoint, Kelly was a physical wide receiver. Bru has his strength, still ability to make plays down the field, and he's going to want the football, no doubt, as he should. I don't know that he's as boisterous as Kelly was in that regard, but I see the comparisons from a physical standpoint. Now, if you're number 15, I think just has to go to the big physical guy. Juwan Jennings wore number 15. Carl Pickens, right? So I think that the next 215 plus pound wide receiver that they go after in that range should be put in number 15.